Great. So welcome again to everyone. Thank you for joining us to share with you more about the 500 Georgia program. We're super excited to be kicking this off. This is Georgia's first international accelerator program of this scale, run in partnership with 500 startups, Georgia's Innovation and Technology Agency, and Bank of Georgia. So we have reps from all these partners here online today to share with you a little bit more about this program. My name is Ariane Diltz. I'm program manager for 500 Georgia. Joining me from 500 today, we have Pedro, who's our managing director. He's going to be sharing with you more about the program as a whole and specifically focusing on the application and interview process to answer any questions you have around that. We also have Nacho, who's our program coordinator, who's going to be helping answer some of your questions today and beyond, as you guys have any questions to follow up on. So we will be having the last half of today saved for any of your questions. So go ahead throughout the presentation we'll do now. You can use the chat box to go ahead and type in any questions you have as they come up. You should also see like a thumbs up in the question box so you can vote on whichever questions as they start coming in that are most interesting for you as well. And we'll do our best to make sure we can answer as many as we can in the time we have at the end. So I'll go ahead on that note and turn it over to Pedro to tell us a little bit more about the program.
Thank you, Ariane. First of all, great to see so many recognizable names here in our attendance list, which is pretty long. So we're super happy that we're drawing all this interest, and hopefully this webinar will help clarify the remaining questions you may have before you submit your applications. Most of you, if not all of you, already know plenty about 500, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but for those of you that don't know all the parts of our mission, I'll add a little bit color here. We're an investment company, and we're known for our investment funds in Silicon Valley and our accelerator in Silicon Valley, but our mission is much broader than that. And we've, from the beginning, set out to discover and back the world's most talented entrepreneurs and help them grow their companies wherever they are, wherever they're created. And for that, we help build ecosystems around the communities where this talent is outside Silicon Valley. As a result, we have created or built over time one of the most powerful platforms on early stage investment. We are one of the most active global investors, and the results continue growing every day. We are now probably one of the largest portfolios in early stage tech, with over 2,400 companies in our portfolio, over 500 million in capital committed, and plenty of large companies in the portfolio. I'll talk more about it. And super happy that we're finally getting a dot in Georgia and Tbilisi. When we build these ecosystems that I was referring to, we work on three main pillars. We work on the expertise and training the founders on how to build their companies and how to grow them fast and efficiently. That's what we're known for. But we also have a series of other foundational programs that help strengthen the other components of an ecosystem, like the capital or the networks that ecosystem needs to establish with other hubs and with other communities, with other ecosystems. So expertise, capital, and networks are three things that we work on when we enter a new region. Our approach of not just flat out investing and investing many small checks in many investors around the world, which was launched 10 years ago with the beginning of the company, initially was not super well understood by people, but the results are now starting to show that this is a pretty strong investment strategy, and we now have close to 20 unicorns in our portfolio. You see 18 here. Tens of companies in what we call the centaur status, so between 100 and a billion, and many more in the 10 to 100 million. They don't fit this slide here. So this is 500. We're pretty cool, but we're going to be pretty cooler when we start working in Georgia, right? And the webinar today is all about 500 Georgia and about the program that we're launching in partnership with JITA and in the Bank of Georgia. This program has two main goals. One is to obviously provide Georgian entrepreneurs with the skills that they need to grow their businesses, whether that is sales, product development, or fundraising, but also make a significant efforts to establish or help establish Georgia as a regional technology hub so that we can attract and work with startups from a much broader region and really help Georgia become this central for technology development, especially early stage development, which is what we're good at training. So this partnership, like I was saying, includes our expertise as investors, as accelerator managers, but also brings in capital from the Bank of Georgia and brings in all the public policy and all the governmental muscle that JITA can bring. And we have today with us representatives from those two entities. David and Andro are here. They'll speak a few minutes about each of their entities and their contribution to this partnership. I will then come back and talk a little bit more details about the program itself. So without further ado, David, why don't we start with you and JITA?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I will be brief because I think the role of the government should be small. So I would like to thank you for joining this webinar. Georgian Innovation and Technology Agency is a governmental agency which is designed to kickstart the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem in the country of Georgia. I'm a founder myself, so it's kind of funny that I'm associated with the government. But on the other hand, it tells you, founders, the way that government works here, which I think should be attraction for those of you outside of Georgia who are considering coming here. Coming here is one of the conditions of this accelerator, because naturally we're spending taxpayers' money, so the condition is for you to set up some entity here. But one thing you should know that the government in Georgia is unlike any other government. The only other governments that operate like the government in Georgia is probably in Estonia, maybe in Ireland. That means that the way that they help is that they come in when the market fails, and then they step outside. Time says a step away, and the founders do their job. So you will see if you decide to participate in the program and open the entity here, you will see how easy it is to form the entity. You can literally drive through, have a burger, and wait for the documents and open the company in 10 minutes. And there will be only help from you for you here in Georgia. Thank you again, and good luck. Back to Android.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity and thank JITA for making this happen and for initiating and accelerate the program and letting us to share the journey. And also big thanks to 500 Startups for participating and driving this program. On behalf of Bank of Georgia Group PLC, we are very excited about our new partnership and the opportunity for sharing this experience and an expertise with organizations like 500 Startups and JITA. So I'll tell you briefly about, most of you, especially Georgians, know about Bank of Georgia, but Bank of Georgia is one of the leading financial institutions that offers a range of different products in retail banking, digital banking, in corporate, private banking, different services such as leasing services and insurance. We're also big on digital innovations when it comes to financial services, as well as the non-financial services across different verticals. In this case, Bank of Georgia will be supporting this accelerator, is already supporting this accelerator by offering an equity funding to selected participants, which will be divided into 3 different phases. And as far as the details, I'll let Pedro, when we come to the latest slide, to go through the detail where we outlined phase by phase each financing part of it. So thanks again, and I wish you good luck and happy to be on board.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David and Andrew. Again, thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for selecting 500 to come and work in Georgia in this program. We're happy to be part of such a complementary partnership. So I'll jump right into the details of the program, and then there will be a period of time at the end for Q&A. But there's obviously a Q&A board, so if you have questions, keep them coming in. Ariane and Natu will help us moderate the discussion at the very end. So application to the program. First of all, the program will include 2 cohorts. I'll give you more details about what that means, but that at this point, what matters is that there will be 2 classes or 2 cohorts. One which will start in June, and applications for that end in 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, don't forget that, 2 weeks. And then the second cohort will take place later in the year, and applications for that cohort will happen mid-September to mid-October, okay? That's one important point about dates. We can come back to these if there's still questions at the end. The application process itself. The website has been live for a while. If you haven't seen it, we're sharing here the URL again. From here, you can find the application form and all the things that you need to submit to apply to the program. And I'll talk more about those details, but 2 points I would like to make here. The application can happen for batch 1, can happen for batch 2, or can happen for the 2 batches. Batches or cohorts, I use the two words interchangeably. So it doesn't hurt to apply for the first cohort, not get accepted for one reason or another, but possibly being accepted for the second one, because we know things evolve. You may do interesting developments between one application and the other. So you can apply to both cohorts. Second, even though there's a deadline to apply for each cohort, and the deadline for the first cohort is May 25th in 2 weeks, the earlier you apply, the better it is for you. You shouldn't apply with an incomplete application, but you should apply as early as possible, because we will be reviewing applications on a rolling basis. That means as soon as you apply, our team will be looking at it, and the easier will be for us to make a judgment on your application, because we have more time to look at it. So let's talk about the application itself. There's 2 parts to it. The first one is to submit the written application on the website. For that, a few things that I would like you to keep in mind. First, we appreciate you inviting us to come and work in Georgia. We are a very international team. We know a lot of languages, but we don't fully control Georgian yet, other than a few people. So the applications will have to be done in English, both the written application and the deck. Please, 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 okay? Second, it is our experience that to apply for a program like this with a high quality application, you would need 2 weeks to work on it. Doesn't mean 2 weeks full time, but you will have to fill in something, you'll have to iterate, you get feedback from people. So 2 weeks is what I would say you would need to prepare a good quality application. And like I said before, we have 2 weeks left to apply for the first cohort. The other point is simplify. It's cheesy to say simple is better than too complex, obviously, but the point here is we don't need to know everything that you're working on, because we know very early on you guys are working on many things to survive. Right now, when you apply to the program, you need to focus on what is essential and what's the core of the venture that you're applying with. You can tell us all about the other things later in the process, or as an annex to your application, or in the interview process if you find that relevant to establish credibility. But for now, please focus on the essential things. Be clear and consistent. What that means is that there may be a lot of numbers to share, and some of them will refer to the core of the products or service that you're building. Some of them will refer to other things that you do to pay the bills. We need to be clear on what the numbers measure, because eventually we will know where they're coming from. So be honest and be transparent when you're filing metrics to us, when you're filing information to us. It will save us time. It will save you the embarrassment of having to justify the numbers are not correct when you get to the interview stage. And finally, references are important. It's, the who you know is important, and it's important here as a matter of validation and as a matter of credibility. It's okay if you're not referred by anyone in the JITA, Bank of Georgia, or 500 family. That's fine. You're not gonna lose credits for that. But if you do know people in our networks, and if there's people in our networks that can vouch for you, it's important you bring that up in your application process. Let me jump into the deck. You can find hundreds of tutorials and hundreds of hours of videos online, including the 500 channels on how to design a strong, powerful deck. So I will not spend a lot of time here, but I will emphasize or remember the key things that we will look at when we assess applications to a program like this. First and foremost, obviously, we need to understand the problem, and we're not experts in all the technologies, and we're not experts in all the verticals. So you have to explain the problem you're addressing in layman terms, in a simple way. And sometimes the joke is, explain it to me as you're explaining it to your grandmother or your grandfather, okay? Second, solution. Focus on the core. Again, I think you sense a trend in what I'm saying. Focus on the core offering and bring up what's your unfair advantage. That may be uniqueness in your solution. That may be uniqueness in your business model. That may be uniqueness in your approach to a region. Okay, so there's a lot of discussions in emerging and frontier markets around copycats and whatnot. We're not worried about that, but we do need to understand what's the unfair, unique advantage of what you're presenting to us. Second, market. It's very easy to come up with big numbers for the big markets, and the experienced ones in the audience will know how to play with the TAM, SAM, SOM numbers to make it super appealing. We've seen thousands of those. We don't need TAM, SAM, SOM that tell a good story. We need TAM, SAM, SOM numbers, if you're going to submit that format, that are credible. And for that, starting with bottom-up numbers is always ideal. What that means is if you know number of people, if you know number of potential businesses that would buy your service and start from there, that's always better than start with a $1 trillion number and then just say, oh, I think I'm going to get 0.5% of that, which is a big number. Team. Too often it's overlooked the need for what we call here founder market fit. People tell you about product market fit. You hear about product market fit all the time. In very, very early stage development, what is also critical is to understand that the founders are the right founders for the right market. So we will be looking for that in your application. We need to understand your background. We need to understand why you're the right person or the right team to fix the problem that you're proposing to solve. And we need to understand that you're coachable. We like perseverance. We like strong-minded people, but we also like people that recognize what they don't know, because that's the only way to progress. And so being coachable is key in our selection. Validation. There's a lot of questions always about validation and about traction. The two topics go hand in hand. What I mean here with validation is if there's things you've been doing to test your product with customers or prospectives, if you were able to bring in advisors that have proven in the market that they're credible figures, if you have been able to get partners on board to help you build your MVP, to us, that's a good, interesting set of signs of validation of what you're developing. And then traction, more specifically, There's always the usual suspects of revenue numbers and users and letters of intent, etc. All of those are important. If you have them, please do share them with us in the written application or the deck. But we also recognize that sometimes the companies are at a point where they're focused on product development, and there's other stages where they're focused on customer focus. We would like to see more and more companies on the customer focus side. That means you're ready to commercialize if you're not already commercializing or monetizing what you have. But we also understand that for some people or for some ventures, the product is being built up. So you can show us traction numbers that have to do with that. For example, if you spend 2 years building something that other people will take another 2 years to replicate and be able to bring to market, that means you have a 2 years head start, right? So even if you're not monetizing, but we know credibly that you have 2 years head start on a big market, that's relevant to us. So that should be mentioned in the application. Two last points on this. One is absolute versus relative numbers, or absolute versus growth rates. They're both relevant. So it's important to know how many dollars you're bringing in or how many lari you're bringing in at the end of the year or at the end of the month. But it is also relevant to see how fast that's growing. And it's okay, again, if you're not in the thousands of or the hundreds of thousands of dollars or lari on a monthly basis, but you're growing fast, that's already an indicator that there's momentum. It will get our eye, it will catch our attention. Finally, we understand that there's thing going on around the world called COVID-19. We understand that's impacting everyone in a very, very significant way. We understand that impacts the metrics that you may have to show, and we acknowledge that, and we will be having that in mind when we look at the numbers that you submit. Wow, that was a mouthful. Selection, okay. So this is very easy to explain. We'll look at all the applications, review all the documents you submit. We will do quick phone screens of the best of those, not all of them, but we will do quick phone screens on the most promising ones, and the best of those will get to an interview, a longer interview with our team. 500 will run that process, and we will do our own pre-selection of companies, which we will present to a committee, a joint committee of 500, Cheetah, and Bank of Georgia, from where a final selection will be made. And we will be announcing to each of the select candidates individually that they were selected and explain the next steps in the process. So for you to go through this process successfully, what are the key things that we're looking at in terms of characteristics of your ventures? First, the use of technology is critical. It doesn't have to be a pure high-tech company. We understand that there's adjustments that need to be made to the nature of the Georgian ecosystem, but it has to at least be a technology-enabled solution. You have to be very clear as to which customer you're targeting, and we need to understand that what you're targeting has a global potential. Even if you start testing in the Georgian market, which is really good because it's small enough that you can test and you can pilot, but we need to understand the global potential for what you're offering. We like to see a working prototype with some traction. I already talked about that. We like to see cross-functional teams. So if you're a team just of techie people, or if you're a team just of business people, we would like you to bring other people on board to complement the knowledge gaps or expertise gaps that you may have. And that's fine. We understand that. Uniqueness of the solution. I already talked about unfair advantage before. Won't spend too much time on that. Your approach to the market has to be defensible. So what that means is either you have unique IP or you have some strategic entry or a strategic angle into this vertical, whether it's network effects or domain or regional expertise. It has to be an highly scalable venture or approach to the problem, and it has to be monetizable. We understand not all of these things will be crystal clear when you're applying. You don't have to fill in all the checkboxes, but the more you do, the better. And we understand that evolution will take place between the application in the entrance to the program, and we're willing to look at that evolution with you. Finally, it has to be something that VCs like us are ready to back, which means that it has to be, again, going back to the previous point, highly scalable, easy to distribute, and easy to monetize in a fast-growing pace. Finally, it has to be done with a Georgian entity. We understand, and we're working on capturing talent from around the world that wants to come and build up their ventures in Georgia, but you will have to register a Georgian entity to be able to attend the program. You don't have to have it registered as soon as you apply to the program, but you have to have it registered by the time the program starts, or you will not be able to enter the program, nor will you be able to receive the capital that the Bank of Georgia or one of its entities is making available. Jumping into the program design. So the program, like I mentioned initially, was designed or is designed for 2 cohorts or 2 classes. Each class will follow this program design. We broke down the program in 4 main stages that you see here described as boot camp, a remote experimentation period, a growth intensive period, and a Silicon Valley exchange. What do these mean? In the boot camp, we will work with the companies for a period of 2 weeks, and we will be working with 15 companies, 15 startups in that batch for 2 weeks on topics like customer segmentation, value proposition, metrics, storytelling. So many of the foundational things you need to have in place in order to start scaling fast like we want you to be doing when you finish the program. With those foundational concepts in your hands, you will go through a period of remote experimentation and remote support by our team of mentors. During that period, you will be given frameworks, you will be given assignments, you will be given challenges that pertain to your company. Okay, you will not be working on ethereal things. You will be working on things that will help you grow your company and test things in your business model and test things in your product. And during that period, we will also be able to understand out of those 15 companies we selected initially, which of them actually are ready to start scaling fast. And out of those, roughly 5 to 10 companies will be brought in for the 3rd stage, which we're calling growth intensive or acceleration period. This is a 6 weeks intensive hard work period of work with us, where we'll be focusing now more on things like marketing, sales, and getting you also ready to pitch your story to the world and go fundraise from other investors. And after that, you'll have another period of follow-on support, which will extend for 4 to 8 weeks, the support itself, again, remote support from our mentors. But then the top companies will also get an extra period of time with us, which we're calling Silicon Valley Exchange. 2 to 3 companies in each of the cohorts will be able to come to Silicon Valley and spend time with us, with companies from our family in San Francisco, meet other investors, meet other partners, and soak in all the experience that Silicon Valley has to offer. Again, this is going to repeat it twice. Speaking of the mentors, we will have a dedicated team of mentors for this program. So including myself as managing director and Ariane Natu on the call today, helping us with everything that's critical for the execution of this program. But we'll have 5 extra mentors, which will be coming and joining us from 4 corners of the world to help us deliver this program. And their backgrounds are complementary. There will be expertise in multiple topics like product, sales, marketing, etc. listing them here. These are mentors that have been doing this for a while. They were all founders themselves, and they've all been investing as angels or as investors in other vehicles. And so they know the pain as founders, they know the requirements as investors, and they are perfectly equipped to help you with your ventures. Finally, so we can quickly jump into the Q&A, I want to cover the investment portion of the program, which is of the full responsibility of the Bank of Georgia or one of its associated entities who can make the investment, but I'll present it here in the interest of time. So this is an investment, again, I would like to make that clear, by the Bank of Georgia or one of its entities. The way the investment will take place on, again, a per cohort basis is as follows. In the first stage of the program, the boot camp phase, the 2 weeks, we will have 15 companies do that boot camp. All of the companies that get selected for that boot camp will get an investment of $15,000, okay? $15,000 for 2% equity on a flexible investment, which I believe will be a convertible note, but the bank should confirm. And then we move on to the next stage. The 5 companies that make it to the intensive period or the acceleration period of 6 weeks will get an additional investment of another $14,000 for an additional 4% of equity. And then finally, the 2 companies that will make it to Valley out of those 5 will get yet another $50,000 of investment for another 4% of equity. So in total, if you're one of the companies that goes from beginning to end of the program, you'll be able to raise from the Bank of Georgia $105,000 for 10% equity. And this will take place twice, 1 per cohort. So that's like super quick, an overview of what the program is and how you can apply. But now we have plenty of time for your questions. And I will stop with this reminder. There's 2 weeks left for the deadline. We know as founders, we have a lot of things to work on. Running our ventures is the most important top priority in our lives, but applying with a high quality application requires time. And I advise you that if you're intended on applying to the program, you start working on it immediately and submit as early as possible. So with that, Ariane, I will open up the floor for you to moderate the questions we're getting from the audience.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Pedro, for running through all of that really important information about the program and the application and interview process as a whole. Just as a reminder, our chat box or question box is still open, so we'll start going through the questions, but if you have any others that you have not submitted yet, please feel free to keep typing in your questions and voting with a thumb so we can make sure we get you all the information that you need. So to get started, excuse me, we had a few questions here kind of about the registration in Georgia. So knowing like if, for example, if we relocate our operating company to be registered in Georgia, can we still keep our holding company where it is? And if they're already registered somewhere else in the EU, do they still need to register in Georgia? Can you kind of reiterate what the criteria are there, please?
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. David, do you want to comment on the incorporation? My take is that as long as there's a Georgian entity that the company is allowed into the program, I don't think that requires shutting down previous entities, but does Gita have a stance on this?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you don't have to shut down, of course, your entities. You just need to establish entity in Georgia, which will receive the investment. So that's the only requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. We also had a few questions here about the application process and when people who apply now can expect to hear back. If you can maybe review kind of the dates for interviews and when they would have a final answer.
Yep. Do you want me to take that one? Or
sure. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I'll go back to the slide, might help. So we are expecting the applications to be assessed on a rolling basis, like I said, but the deadline is the May 25th. We expect to be doing, as you can see here, the screening until May 26th, running some interviews already as early as May 20th, all the way to May 29th, and announcing the final selection at the beginning of June.
Great. We also had a few questions on validation. If maybe Pedro, you can help kind of reiterate what would be some good examples of how to validate an idea, and specifically knowing if something like growing Facebook page likes or group members, can that be counted as early traction?
That's a great question. So two things on the validation. My point on the validation was, we understand this is a new market. It's at its very early stages. It's in its infancy. There's already some mature plays. I don't discount those. Obviously, we're aware of that. But a lot of the applicants will very likely still be in its giving, like starting the first steps with their ventures. So things like partnerships that you've been able to do with other businesses that are required for your business model, or letters of intent where you will be able to prove that other entities or other prospective clients are on board as soon as your product or your service is ready to go. Those are things that we were putting in the validation bucket, as in we see signals from the market that what you're building is wanted by clients and by users. The traction can be seen as a step forward, forward on that, where we're already measuring how much of that interest actually is and how strong that interest is, how strong the momentum is. Again, we will be looking at the standard or the traditional metrics of revenue and users and other metrics, because it's important that you also understand that the metrics that are considered critical for each business depend on the business that you're building, on the vertical that you're working. If you're an e-commerce play is one thing. If you're a B2B enterprise company selling software development is a different thing. And so, or software support services is a different thing. And so we will be having that in mind. But the metrics that we're looking at in terms of numbers, I'd rather not put those numbers up front right here, because we will adjust those to the stage of development of the country. I'm sure you know the metrics that are floated around when people apply and ventures apply to our programs in Silicon Valley, and the mythical like 20% week-on-week growth for us in YC and whatnot. Obviously, the bar is different for Georgia, but we would like to see some numbers in a functional product when you apply.
Great, thank you for clarifying. We have a question here that a few people would like to know: is it obligatory to already have an existing business, or is this program open to accepting ideas?
No, we're not going to just accept ideas to the program, because what we can do for you is to help grow what you have faster. Helping you build a product off of an idea, which may or not have market validation, requires a different program design. It requires a different strategy than the one we're using for this program. So if you only have an idea, it's not advisable that you apply. I would say the best advice is build a functional prototype as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible, and come back for cohort 2. That's the best strategy.
Great. And just a side note, I did see before there were a couple of raised hands. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, if you can go ahead and type them directly into the chat box, that's the best way for us to get to your questions. So make sure you use that function. In the meanwhile, there's a few questions on a little bit more detail about some of the program curriculum and content. So we have one question asking kind of how this compares to the Dojo program or some of 500's other programs. Will this include like something similar in regards to growth hacking in particular?
Yeah, I mean, growth hacking includes so many things. I don't know how to comment on that. I can say that our programs cover, many programs cover growth frameworks, let's put it that way. right? And we will use the ones that are better fits for each venture going through the program. Some principles are generic, and so the things that are taught in the growth dojos, very likely some of them will be taught here too, but maybe taught in a different way, or the tools may be applied in a different way, because this program is highly customized to the needs of the program, of the companies that will go through it. It's a very small batch size, so we will have a lot of time for hands-on work with each of the companies, and we will be working very hardly to determine which growth frameworks or which tools are best fit for your needs at the moment. And that will evolve even for each company between the bootcamp and the experimentation period and the acceleration period. And we will be working on you throughout that journey. If the question is, just to complement that, if the question is, I've done other 500 program like a dojo, does it make sense to apply to this program? I would say it depends. I would say it depends, and I think it's still worth talking to us about it. If you want to submit the application, obviously indicate that you've done a previous program. We will know anyways, but we can have a discussion around that.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying. We have another question here asking if you can elaborate a little bit more in particular on the growth experiments and what happens in the remote experimentation phase of the program, and just in general kind of how that will be conducted.
Yeah, so again, two sides. One is the growth tools, and I'm not going to go into details here as to which frameworks we're going to use, but on the point of the remote experimentation, I think that's important to cover in a little bit more detail. 500 has been designing its programs in a way that allows companies enough time to experiment with the concepts that we're trying to train them on. We understand, as I mentioned earlier, that you can't be, it's very hard to be working on an acceleration program full-time while running your company full-time. Though we do believe founders have superpowers, but time stretching is still not one of them. So we understand that, and as a consequence or as a result, we've been designing our programs to allow for time to teach them the concepts and then allow time for them to test some of those concepts in their own ventures, and then come back, see the results, and come back and tweak them, adjust, move on to new tests, move on to new experiments. So the remote experimentation period is a 4 to 8 weeks program where you will have daily, weekly contact with the mentors. You will have a dedicated mentor, but also access to all the other mentors, where you're going through a series of challenges to get you and your company to the next level. For example, you have 10 paying clients. What do you need to do to get to 100 paying clients? What are the things you need to do? What are the steps to get there? And then you're given micro challenges and you're giving homework, if you will, to work on those things over that period of 4 to 8 weeks, and we'll see the evolution. We'll help you with your challenges, and we want to make sure that at the end of that period, you do get to the target that you propose to achieve with your mentor at the beginning of the remote experimentation period.
Great, thanks for clarifying. We have another question here about the investment and wondering, are all startups obliged to take the investment on these terms if they want to participate in the program?
I don't know if any of the partners wants to take that first.
Sure, I'll take that. As far as the approach, we would like to have a standardized approach across all the participants. But that doesn't mean that, depends on the business and depends on the idea and depends on the overall the product that the startup is offering. I think it can be part of a review we will have to with 500 startups, and Gita will have to review the details of the specific startup and decide whether we'll take an exception or not. But overall, we would like to take an approach, standardized approach across all the participating startups. Yeah. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another question here, wondering about the Silicon Valley immersion element of the program, and what kind of can be expected in terms of funding possibilities or focus on curriculum and content. Can you tell us a little bit more what to expect for that?
Yeah, well, we're also big believers in teaching people how to fish rather than feeding them the fish. And so this period of time in Silicon Valley is for you to apply everything that you've learned from us before that. We will make sure that you have support while you're in San Francisco with us. You'll obviously have office space and you'll have our support, and our team will help guide you through a series of events and initiatives that will be prepared. But above all, we expect you to be able to do a lot of things there on your own. Fundraising is obviously one of them. Building partnerships is obviously another. And the 500 network is pretty strong and wide and deep, and you will be able to leverage it. But we do expect that a lot of that work will be done by the ventures themselves. But there will be plenty of opportunities for that, and we will make sure we support as much as possible in that process.
Great. We have a couple more questions on a few specifics of the investment terms. Wondering, one, is the equity investment from Bank of Georgia a convertible note or not? And two, is there going to be a call option to buy out shares?
We don't have an exact form right now, but all of those are the possibilities, right? And we're open to negotiation. It can be different instruments we could use, and I wouldn't say we're going to be limiting which way we're going to take. So for now, we don't have a specific way we're going to go with, but we're open to negotiation and we're open to suggestions.
Great. We have another question here. This one probably for you, Pedro. Someone's asking, they know that there's currently open applications for 500 Startups Program Global, or I assume meaning the program back in San Francisco. Can you comment on a little bit, whether it might make more sense for someone to apply to the Georgia program versus the San Francisco program, how that ties together?
Yeah, that's a very good and important question. The programs are of slightly different nature, and the mentors working on the programs are also different. And so, unfortunately, I think the answer is it depends. So it depends on the company that you're building. It depends at which stage you are. It depends on what you're looking for the future of the company in the short term and the long term. I would say that the Georgia program is probably a best fit for companies that are slightly earlier in their development journey. They are starting to grow, but not ready for the Silicon Valley stage, if you will. And they may, for example, do this program and then apply to San Francisco afterwards. Some companies may be, full steam ahead. I know that there's plenty of Georgian founders already in the Bay Area, already in LA, already in the US, that may find it interesting to go through this program. Some of them may find it interesting to apply directly to 500 SF. So that will depend on a series of factors like I described. And we're happy, as always, we're happy to have like one-on-one conversations later if it's not clear yet which program is best fit for your company.
Great. And before we get to the next question, just a reminder, I still see a couple of hands raised in the group. So if you have questions, do make sure that you type them out written in our chat box so we can answer those in the remaining minutes of the call here. We have another question. This one also more about criteria, so probably for you, Pedro. When talking about market scale, can we consider our market in our region or Asia or East Europe as our market expansion target, or does it need to be the US?
No, it does not need to be the US. The US does not own the Holy Grail. So we need to see global ambition, as in it's not something that's only built for a small market in a small country, whether that's Georgia or surrounding countries or any other country in the planet. But it doesn't have, but that global scale doesn't have to mean forcefully US market. It can be CIS, it can be Asia, it can be Europe, any of those.
Great. We had a couple more questions here on some things we've already touched on. So a question about needing to register in Georgia, as we mentioned before. Yes, so one of the requirements will be to open up an entity in Georgia. That shouldn't affect, hopefully, if you have other entities in other places, that's okay. But yes, it is mandatory to register also in Georgia, as we mentioned before. Someone's asked if we can share the presentation file. We will be sharing a recording of the webinar. So you will get that. We can share kind of the information with that as well, with a recap email. We have one more follow-on question here, going back to the investment and the kind of equity structure. This question asks, so the teams will not be required to take equity investment during the program, but at the same time, they will have to if they want to advance to the next phases. Is this correct? Or can you kind of explain how the tiered, I guess, process through the phases works? Either Andrew or Pedro.
Sure, I can take that. So Pedro outlined a three-phase approach for the funding. And my initial comment, my previous comment was, so standardized approach, by standardized approach, we mean that if the startup was selected with one of the 15 participants, so we would like to go with the standardized approach, which is the investment equity funding from the Bank of Georgia, where in return the startups will give the equity part percentage-wise was already outlined. Now there might be some exceptions, and I don't want to discourage, or I don't really have a right, I don't really have an exact answer right now. So there might be some exceptions, but very few, and it's going to depend on case by case. So again, we will take the standardized approach with possibly some exceptions, or maybe not. It has to be, I mean, right now I cannot decide on, I'm talking on behalf of Bank of Georgia Group PLC, I cannot decide whether we're going to take, which approach we're going to take, but we're going with the standardized, recommended standardized approach. And again, with the help of 500 and the JITA, we'll come to a decision whether we are going to take an exception or not.
Great. We have another question here about demo day, and will there be a demo day held for the Georgia program, which includes international investors? Pedro, can you tell us a little bit more about the plan for that?
I thought you wanted to take that one.
Oh, me? Go for it, Pedro.
Yes, there will be opportunity for you to showcase your venture to investors, partners at the end of the program. Yes.
Okay, so let's see. We have one last minute. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Yeah, actually, I think I've seen a couple of questions here. If it costs any money to the founders to participate in the program, Pedro, can you let us know?
Yeah, there's no acceleration fees. You don't pay to attend the program. We don't, so we don't charge any acceleration fees. We don't cover any of your costs of housing or any other extra costs that you may have. Those you have to incur them yourselves, or if you get funding, you can decide how much of that goes to cover those costs. One thing is the office space. I didn't cover that earlier. we will obviously be hosting all these COVID allowing all these in-person in Tbilisi in space dedicated to us by our partners. But we don't have office space for you on a continuous basis. So while when the initiatives are taking place and the training is happening, you have space with us and to work with our mentors. And then outside those periods, you have to have your own office space or workspace.
Terrific. Great. Well, I think we're just about at time. So there's a couple last questions, and don't worry, we'll stay on after we end here to kind of answer any remaining last thoughts or questions you guys have. But I want to take a moment to thank all of you guys for joining us today, and a big thank you to David, Andrew, Pedro for also sharing lots of really great information with us about the program today. As Pedro pulled up this clock here, is a reminder to apply now, early, get started. Deadline is 2 weeks from now, but don't wait. Apply as soon as you can. Definitely get started on your application. You can apply right on our site, which the link was shared before. We'll send it out again with a follow-up email when you receive the webinar recording for today. So thank you very much. And those who have a couple more questions, feel free. We'll stick on a few more minutes here to make sure we answer those for you.